She was the perfect student, a girl with everything going for her, a brilliant mind, a generous heart, and a future that seemed limitless. But on a single night in March, everything changed. What started as a simple home invasion would become one of the most shocking murders to grip the nation, leaving behind a story of random violence, cold-blooded murder, and the terrifying reality that evil doesn't always announce itself. This is the case of Eve Carson, and this is U.S. Crime Files. It all began in Athens, Georgia on November 19, 1985, when Eve Carson entered the world. From the moment she could walk, Eve Carson was destined for greatness. Her drive was unmatchable. In high school, she didn't just attend classes. She became vice president of the student council. She volunteered at nursing homes and shelters for abused teens. She worked as a congressional page. She even assisted in a stem cell research laboratory, all while maintaining her honor roll status. Teachers and peers alike knew they were watching someone special. When Eve graduated with honors and headed to the University of North Carolina, she only accelerated her trajectory. She pursued a double major in political science and biology. She received a prestigious scholarship based on her exceptional academic record. On campus, she became a leader in student organizations, involvement that seemed to grow with each passing semester. But Eve wasn't just about ambition for her own sake. She continued her volunteer work with the same passion. She taught science at an elementary school. She traveled internationally, spending a summer in Ecuador working alongside doctors, studying in Cuba, and joining a research team in Egypt. By all accounts, Eve Carson wasn't just a student, she was a force of nature. By early 2005, Eve was 22 years old, a senior at UNC in her final year. She had already landed a job offer from a major company, ready to launch her career immediately after graduation. Her life was exactly where it should be. On the evening of March 5th, around 1:30 in the morning, Eve was home with her roommates. The group was heading out to a party, but Eve declined. She had studying to do for her upcoming exams. She needed to focus. Her friends left without her, promising to be back before dawn. As they drove away, Eve settled in with her books, completely unaware that she had just made the decision that would change everything. The roommates returned home around 4:30 in the morning, their night out complete. But the moment they walked inside, something felt wrong. The front door was standing wide open. The lights were still on inside the apartment. But Eve was gone, her car was missing. They called her cell phone, hoping for some rational explanation. Maybe an emergency had come up, maybe she'd had to leave suddenly, but Eve didn't answer. Hours passed. By the following day, with still no word from Eve and no return of her car, one of the roommates made the call that would set off a chain of events that would stun an entire nation. She contacted the police and reported Eve Carson missing. But as the officer listened to the details, his expression darkened. He had information that would make this missing persons case turn into something far worse. Earlier that morning, around 5 a.m., police had received a call from a woman living approximately 1 mile from Eve's apartment. She had been awakened from sleep by a sound that would haunt her forever. Gunshots, multiple gunshots, followed by a scream so terrifying it pierced the night. Terrified and unsure what to do, she had called 911. Officers arrived within minutes and discovered the body of a young woman lying on the pavement. No identification, no phone, no way to immediately know who she was, but one thing was undeniable. She had been shot multiple times, the wounds clearly fatal. When the roommate saw the photograph of the victim, her blood ran cold. It was Eve. The police had found Eve Carson and she was dead. Now the investigation truly began. Detectives had a timeline, but it was disturbingly short. At 1:30 a.m., Eve was at home studying. By 5 a.m., her body was found a mile away. Somewhere in those 3.5 hours, something catastrophic had happened. Her car was missing. Her wallet was gone. Her credit cards were nowhere to be found. The initial theory seemed clear: robbery. But detectives needed to understand the sequence of events, the how and the why that led to Eve lying on a cold street with bullets in her body. Forensic experts examined Eve's computer and discovered something significant. The machine had been active until approximately 3:30 a.m., meaning Eve had been home, studying or doing something on that computer for at least 2 hours after her friends had left for the party. That meant the attack, the abduction, the events that led to her murder, all happened. The case dominated the news. Eve's face was everywhere. On college campuses across the state, fear spread like wildfire. How could this happen to someone like Eve? How could someone so brilliant, so kind, so full of promise be taken so violently and so randomly? The community wanted answers, and they wanted justice. The police were flooded with tips, hundreds of them, but none seemed to lead anywhere concrete. That is, until detectives decided to examine Eve's financial records. Someone had used Eve's credit cards. Just 18 minutes after Eve was last seen using her computer at 3:30 a.m., 2 withdrawals were made from her bank account. $700 total, split across 2 separate transactions at an ATM near a shopping center on the far side of town. The perpetrator had hit the daily withdrawal limit and tried to pull out more, but the bank's security measures stopped them. Detectives immediately requested the security footage from that ATM, and what they found was chilling. The footage showed a man sitting inside Eve's car using her card. In the backseat, barely visible, was another figure. Could it be Eve? Was she still alive at that moment? The image quality was too degraded to say for certain, but investigators had to consider that possibility. But the suspect didn't stop there. Over the following hours, he attempted to use Eve's card at multiple other ATMs throughout the city. Most of them had no surveillance cameras, providing him with cover. This continued for days. On March 7th, around 12:30 a.m., 2 days after the murder, the suspect showed up at a 24-hour convenience store in a neighboring town and attempted to use Eve's card again. This time, the bank declined the transaction, but this time there was a working security camera. When detectives reviewed the footage, they saw someone attempting to withdraw money, but it wasn't the same man from the first ATM. This was a different person entirely. The investigation had just taken a major turn. Either multiple people were involved in Eve's murder, or the first suspect had passed her card off to an accomplice. Detectives released both images to the media, asking the public for help identifying the men in the surveillance footage. Hundreds of tips poured in, but nothing concrete emerged. Days dragged on. Then on March 12th, the breakthrough finally came. An anonymous caller contacted the police with a name, Dario Atwater. The caller said they recognized the man in the convenience store footage, and that man was Dario Atwater. Investigators immediately pulled Atwater's background, and what they found was deeply troubling. Despite being only 21 years old, Dario Atwater already had an extensive criminal history, multiple arrests for robbery, assault, drug offenses. He had served time in jail, though he'd been released early on several occasions. Just 2 days after Eve's murder, he was scheduled to appear in court for carrying a handgun while on probation. When detectives compared old mug shots of Atwater to the convenience store surveillance footage, the resemblance was striking. They had found their man. Police went directly to Atwater's residence. During questioning, he denied any involvement in the murder, but the surveillance evidence was damning. They took him into custody. As the investigation continued, another name emerged. Lawrence Lovett. At just 17 years old, Lawrence already had his own criminal history, and when detectives reviewed his mugshot, they immediately recognized him as the person driving Eve's car at the first ATM on the night of the murder. When police went to arrest Lawrence, they found him barricaded inside his home. The situation escalated. SWAT was called in. Only after a tense standoff did officers finally apprehend him. Like Atwater, Lawrence also denied any involvement in Eve's murder. Both suspects were charged and held in custody. Without their cooperation, detectives had to build their case another way. Cell phone data provided a crucial piece of evidence. On the night of Eve's murder, both Dario Atwater's and Lawrence Lovett's phones connected to a cell tower in Eve's neighborhood, despite the fact that both of them lived in a completely different part of the city. It wasn't a coincidence. The investigators theorized what had happened. Atwater and Lovett had gone out that night with one goal in mind: find someone to rob, find someone vulnerable, find someone alone. As they drove through a residential neighborhood, they spotted Eve through a window in her apartment. A young woman home alone at night, they saw an opportunity. Armed with guns, they broke into her home and forced her into her own car at gunpoint. They drove from ATM to ATM, forcing her to withdraw money, attempting to maximize their take before the daily limit stopped them. Throughout this ordeal, according to what would later be revealed, Eve pleaded with them. She begged them to let her go. She promised she wouldn't tell anyone. She just wanted to go home. But Atwater and Lovett had other plans. They had made a decision. Eve had seen their faces. They had done nothing to hide their identities. In their twisted logic, that meant she had to die. They took her to a deserted street on the outskirts of town, and in her final moments, in an act of desperation that speaks to the kind of person Eve Carson was, she asked them to pray with her. 2 cold-blooded criminals. One innocent girl, and a request for mercy that would never come. They shot her multiple times with 2 guns and left her body to be discovered by a passing resident hours later. Facing the evidence and the reality of what he'd done, Dario Atwater made a choice. He agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for his confession and his guilty plea, prosecutors removed the possibility of the death penalty. He would spend the rest of his life in prison instead. In April 2010, 5 years after the crime, Atwater was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 30 years. When it came time for him to hear his sentence, Atwater turned to Eve's family in the courtroom. He apologized. He admitted he deserved every year of punishment that awaited him. Lawrence Lovett refused to plead guilty. His trial began in December 2011. Despite his lawyer's efforts, Atwater's confession and the overwhelming evidence proved too much. Lawrence was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But his story didn't end there. In 2013, the State Court of Appeals overturned his sentence, ruling that life without parole for a juvenile offender was excessively harsh. Lawrence was granted a new trial. This time, he told the court that everyone makes mistakes. He insisted he wasn't the monster people thought he was, but the evidence remained unchanged. The judge again sentenced him to life in prison, where he remains today. What makes this case even more chilling is what came after. Investigators discovered that Lawrence Lovett was a suspect in another remarkably similar murder. In January 2008, just months before Eve's murder, a 29-year-old student was killed during a home invasion. Money was withdrawn from the victim's account at multiple ATMs throughout the city. The pattern was identical, but authorities could never secure enough evidence to make the charges stick. The case went cold and Lawrence was never prosecuted. How many other victims might there have been? How many other families might have suffered the same loss? The murder of Eve Carson didn't just devastate her family, it shook an entire state, it sparked change. In February 2009, North Carolina legislators enacted new laws introducing harsher penalties and more rigorous procedures for gang-related offenses and crimes of violence. The legislation was directly inspired by Eve's case. Her death, in a tragic way, became a catalyst for justice reform. At the University of North Carolina, a scholarship was established in Eve's name. A memorial garden was created on campus, a place where students could remember the girl who had given so much, who had so much more to give. And in a moment that captured the human spirit in the face of tragedy, one of Eve's close friends became a finalist on American Idol. When he took the stage, he told the world that Eve's death had given him the courage to pursue his dreams. Without her, he said, he never would have had the strength to audition. Eve Carson's legacy lives on, not just in the laws that changed because of her, but in the lives she continues to inspire. This is the case of Eve Carson, a brilliant young woman taken in an act of random violence by two men searching for quick money and easy targets. She was 22 years old, she had everything ahead of her. And in a single night it was all taken away, but her memory endures, her story matters, and justice, though it came at an unimaginable cost, was ultimately served. If you found this case compelling, please like this video and subscribe to US Crime Files. We cover cases like this every single night, stories of crimes that shocked America, mysteries that captivated the nation, and justice that finally prevailed. Stay sharp, stay vigilant.